Hello, this is Mark. In this video, I'm going to talk about creativity. In regards to creativity, everyone can utilize it. It is, in my view, it's a function of energy, motivation, and emotional intensity. If you ever notice with creativity, you have to have some purpose. You have to have some, drive. It's instigated by the motivation, aspirations, the excitement, because essentially we all have chemicals and they dopamine. It gives us, and when we have a task or anything that excites us, there's a strong pull towards that one area, and the pull is proportional to the change in the chemistry within our bodies, and usually there's small range, and so forth, day-to-day events that can almost um, it creates the transience that we experience in everyday life situations. And that gives us excitement. It gives us, and as humans, we're always trying to get progression. We're always trying to move forward. We're always trying to seek novelty to an extent. Um, Whether it's being promoted in our careers, whether it's learning new information, whether it's going to different places, whether it's um, traveling around the world, whether it's reading new books, whether it's writing a new um, story, whether it's painting a different picture. Some people may gravitate towards art, some people may gravitate towards reading. In each of these domains, there's avenues for creativity, and everyone can utilize it in different ways. The thing is the more we become objective, the more we become confined with the rules of society. Obviously, society, they've constructed these rules as a form of the control. You don't want to deviate. If you deviate too much, obviously society will collapse. So it needs to impart these rules. However, when you're fully immersed, or you're basically, you don't have the autonomy and independence. You're not essentially you're fixated on just the facts or the objective truths that we have up to this point. It kind of limits the creativity, because if you take like a robot, for example, a robot can solve multiple problems. It utilizes knowledge and reserves that we have to solve problems, but you can't transcend that. To transcend that, you need this like drive, this motivation, this excitement for something that is beyond what is known, and something that you can kind of manipulate. Creativity is essentially manipulation of what we have in store, what we have ultimately, because it's not necessarily absolutely novel. When you say, "Oh yeah, I created this," ultimately you're utilizing what is known, what is in your repository, what is and store the storage place to yield a output. And output, create an output. Yes, there's a degree of novelty, but ultimately it's not fully yours. It's your predecessors, everyone else who has given us the stimuli for us to process. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the stimuli. We would have nature, and now that we have nature and we have the artificial world, we're bombarded with more stimuli than ever before. Our creative potential is magnified. However, now we have platforms such as social media. We have platforms, Facebook and Snapchat and so forth, and we're kind of going, it's an inward focus, and these distractions, they're kind of taking up, a certain amount of time, and we also have more responsibilities. We have a lot of job. We have to cater to a lot of people, especially in densely populated areas, and our shifts are getting, the time is expanding, the stress levels are expanding because everything's becoming faster paced. And anytime you become in a stressful event, because ultimately everyone experiences energy shifts. When you go in a stressful situation, yes, it can induce a state of it can accelerate or increase your energy. It gives you adrenaline. It can possibly boost your creativity, or give you as a survival mechanism. But and it may give you a different state of mind and a different state of awareness. It may expand your consciousness. However, anytime you're always in this transient state, you're always this is essentially where it leads to chaos, and creativity is very similar to a chaotic state. You basically need that chaos. You basically need the ideas that are could be flooding in through your mind, or you're getting the excitement. You're getting the it's basically it's a progression. You're progressing towards something that you want to achieve, and it's basically, it could be one thing, it could be multiple things, it could be just one or singular um, path, but whatever the path is, you strive and you use all your energy to go towards that point, and then you're driving energy as you're going towards it, and that's where the creativity, it's facilitated, it's the response, the because essentially we all have neurotransmitters, we all have, and these impact our states. Anytime, like for instance, depression, if anyone's experienced depression, which I have multiple times, you become apathetic at certain times, and basically depression is, it's an energy issue. It's a shift in energy. Your body needs to recharge. You lose energy, so your mind starts becoming sluggish. You start getting brain fog. You basically become apathetic. Your emotions become flat. You can't even communicate correctly. Everything's quick relative to what your rate of processing is. It's this horrible state, because ultimately, where you were previously with, there's a huge divergence in that point, when you were very active and productive and creative, and now you're dull and apathetic, and it seems to be pointing towards singularity. Everything becomes meaningless because everything's becoming compressed, shut out. Your awareness is being compressed. Your consciousness, you're fixated on too many, whether it's minute or information that that's you're hyper focusing on, or generally tends to be pessimistic or negative, because ultimately the state, because depression can also cause pain. It coincides with pain. Physical pain. It coincides with the just fatigue, and you feel like a zombie, and in this state you lose the potential that you may had before, and you just want to sleep, and you just have no livelihood. You have no meaning. You lose that meaning. So essentially, everything collapses at that point. But the key is it's always, for me, creativity. It's if you go, it's not. It's a renewable resource. You can't go extremely intense. I mean, if you were to go extremely intense, I'm sure there's cases, but it's very hard to sustain that. It's to sustain that, you always essentially, you need to kind of be balanced. You can't go overboard. Anytime if you do go overboard, it basically you're by law of conservation of energy, your body has to shift back because it needs to recharge to get back. Because ultimately, when you create this level or disequilibrium, the body naturally tries to pull back towards it. And when there's a disconnect in that, essentially, you're still, you can't always, you're still going to essentially, if you take, let's say, the summation of all if you suppose the state that you're in, or energy state that you're in, you could quantify it. If you were to quantify and you take the summation, the average of it would probably be tending towards equilibrium. It's just a natural law. It's the cyclic of nature. You're always going to have the cycles, whether it's small or whether it's large, and the cycles can happen internally, externally. We always have events in our lives, circumstances that can cause problems. Whether it's losing a job, whether it's losing a family member, these can initiate different states, and ultimately, everyone has a range. Everyone exists in a range. Everyone experiences a different range of emotional states or energetic states, and that's what makes us human, essentially. It gives us that component of creativity, which robots are people who basically, like you imagine, you take a robot, and it has essentially, the difference is a robot has no emotion, it's pure logic. And with the technology we have today, we can obviously, we have some leeway. We can add, I guess, we can replicate or simulate the emotional component, but the problem is, I'm talking about like a case scenario when you have pure logic, no emotion. So it's like a supercomputer. It can do algorithms very quickly, efficiently, get to solve the problem utilizing, it's a form of convergence. So essentially you're utilizing all the information that you need, and you're converging towards the answer. Creativity, on the other hand, is a form of divergence. So basically, we live in a world of known information. Think about like a sphere, and you have different elements within a sphere. It's known information. When you have different domains that you reside in, you're expanding that sphere. You're expanding the known information. So that's why it's very important to try to get in different fields, to be open to go, different fields, or delve into new areas, because ultimately there's always a relation. There's an interconnection between all the different areas: music, philosophy, mathematics, physics, chemistry, so all these different avenues, there's connections between each of the, and linkages that if you do expand your knowledge, you can actually expand your skill in another area, even though you may not perceive it that way initially. It's ultimately, once you build that connection, and then it can facilitate the creativity in different areas. And ultimately, creativity is facilitated by the repository that you have. You take the repository, you take the knowledge. It's like fission. So you're taking a dense, you're basically accumulating knowledge. You're forming a very densely compact. If you imagine, like, it's just like energy, or it's a how would I put it? It's essentially, you're pulling in. This is abstract, so it's pulling in information. You're condensing in this huge sphere, and then the larger it becomes, like the larger the mass. If you imagine, if it did exhibit mass, or masses, if you make it proportional to the number of inputs or the number of data points or knowledge base, and you take that, and basically it implodes, or basically explodes. So essentially, that's going to give the potential for creativity, the higher potential, and the potential for instance, the energy that is created from it is going to, it basically creates this chaotic state. So the problem is, though, you don't want to go to the point when it's too divergent, because at that point you're not able to make any production. You lose the production, because your memory is proportional, essentially. There is a point, and everyone's different, but ultimately we can only retain a certain amount of information in a given time frame. And when you're diverging at a very fast rate, at the rates approaching infinity, or it's going extremely fast, like the flicker of a camera, the frame rate, and it's approaching infinity, then you're basically in total chaos and anxiety, and you're not able to do anything. You're bombarded. So essentially, to contain that, it's probably best to try to balance that avenue, or basically don't go down so many different paths, because you can drive energy in a sense. You can basically create this, change your energy state. Basically, we can alter it by different, whether it's taking stimulants, whether it's taking, like, drinking alcohol. We're always changing our states. We're always, we're never going to be completely in equilibrium. We're always causing, and this is what kind of gives us a life. What gives us the experience. It gives us the awareness. It gives us, the insights. We're able to introspect. We're able to change. We're able to, make innovations. We're able to do multiple different things. And ultimately, if we didn't have this range, we wouldn't have the potential. We didn't have the uniqueness, we wouldn't have the potential. So the uniqueness, everyone has different levels of creativity, but everyone has it. Everyone can utilize it. It's just a point. It's just a matter that we all know that creativity does take energy. And I mean, you need energy to utilize it, and ultimately it takes a lot of energy to put all your, it takes a lot of energy just to kind of go down that avenue, or that path, with complete motivation, dedication, and basically, although you're driving the excitement, but ultimately you could potentially burn yourself out, and because it does, like I mentioned before, it's not the path of least resistance. You're going on a divergence, and essentially, to get to a point, to get to the productive, you have to converge beyond that point. But the key is, by diverging and obtaining multiple different options, multiple different scenarios, you're expending more energy relative to the case when you're just utilizing the objective information that is known within your mind to solve a problem using just convergence. And generally, that's with our school system. It tends to be a convergent system where you're just focused on getting one unified answer. Certain fields like philosophy and the open-ended discussions that you experience, it's different. That benefits the creative minds, and generally people who are creative will drop out of school, the more it becomes convergence, the more it becomes structured, the more it becomes contained. So different areas or different fields are good for people who naturally use it. And not everyone's going to use it to the highest degree, because some people just like solving objective problems. Like a supercomputer, they like solving it with efficiency. They like solving problems in the fastest amount of time, you know. And ultimately, creativity would kind of sidetrack them in that area. Or they maybe want to achieve a goal. If you want to achieve a goal, you can't really diverge too much, because if you do, I mean, it's good to go down different paths, to go down different scenarios, but diverging too much can lead you astray from your goal, and in that case it would be a disadvantage. So people use it for different reasons. They have different goals. They have different avenues. But ultimately, for me, I like utilizing it because it's just something that usually it starts when you're young, at a young age. If you're a good, for instance, like you're a chess grandmaster, usually the grandmasters started at a young age. So basically, it becomes it be base they because when you're formulating your identity, everything your mind, the rate of change that your mind is growing at is much higher during certain periods, like the early years and then puberty again. And you're basically at that time you experience energy spurts. You're experiencing different phases in your life, different areas where like you basically facilitate your identity. You start getting your interests and aspirations and goals in life, and you basically start pursuing them. But during these phases, you're soaking in more information at a given time than ever before, and basically your mind is processing, and it's processing at a fast rate, and essentially because you're soaking in, you're learning at a magnified rate, and when you facilitate your identity from beyond that point, it becomes harder, more resistant for you. Like if you start chess at an older age, you could be very good, but it's going to be more resistant than if you were to start at a younger age and gain that experience, and then the same applies with a lot of languages. So that's just because it's basically kind of tied to your identity. And when it's not really tied to your identity, because your identity is basically fixed, not entirely fixed, but beyond a certain point, you always have different phases in life, your different changes, but your personality becomes relatively fixed. It's not going to be exactly, but it's not going to be extreme deviance from that, unless you have like some other underlying issue. So basically, I was just going with this is, everyone uses it. Creativity, it's something that, we know that you do expend more energy and it takes longer to get to arrive to a solution, but it does bring satisfaction in those who derive it from, utilizing the creativity. It's something that gives the passion, the emotion, the expression. So, if some people who don't have that, because I said it's proportional to emotion. So people who are heavily logical, who don't really express as much, whether it's they maybe internalize their emotions more, or so forth. Everyone has it, but some people don't have it to a high degree. If their logic is at the extreme end, they won't experience the emotion at the extreme end. It's going to be kind of depressed and more infantile. So it's basically they may become reactive at certain points, not be able to deal with emotions at certain points, but it's generally not utilized frequently, and therefore, the expression of creativity is kind of hindered and to extent, because they're more focused on solving problems objectively and efficiency and quickly, and being able to, and generally that's more important to survival in industry and the standards, because everything, most things have been, standardized, and they're, like in engineering, it is not changing very often, so you have to abide by the rules, you have to abide by the standards, the formulas, the calculations, and you can't really go out that range, but you can, so the way I think about it, it's a form of confinement. It's a form of confinement in regards to creativity. It limits creativity and the expression, and it can actually hinder, because if you're not going to derive energy from that, then it can cause, you could hypothesize that it could be, progressively maybe trigger a state of, depression, because it's in a sense, you're not in a domain where you're driving the fulfillment in your life, the satisfaction. So that's just my input on creativity. Clearly, this is just my viewpoint, and everyone will have a different viewpoint. And what we know, like last thing I want to say is, scientifically, we have a lot of information, but ultimately, on the grand scale, we know nothing. So just because our perception's limited. We don't know. We think sometimes we may think we know a lot, but everything is complex. I mean, there's even though we view it simple, but that's only on the surface level. Um, there's so many different components in actuality, and the absolute truth that we're never going to reach. It's just something that we just try to strive and converge to, but ultimately, it's always going to be way well in the distance. Well, we can get closer and closer and closer, but we're never going to get. It's always going to be so far away that we, like if you think of it like the pole, or how would I put it? Like the pole, as you get closer to the absolute or point of absoluteness, the pole becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. Well, we're never going to get to the point. We're basically going to get to a point where it's very loose connection. Because we're only limited. We're constrained by our frame of reference, our perception, and so forth. And our perception is actually a function of the energy that we drive. And energy that we drive is a function of our progression in life and our awareness, our consciousness, and ultimately how reactive we are to the situations that transpire in our life. And if we get to the point where we build this awareness, this global picture in our mind that, a lot of this stuff really doesn't matter. Like it's like status, fame, stuff like that. It's we should always just strive for understanding, for being able not fixated on certain elements like materialism or other avenues. I mean, it's okay to delve in these fields, or everyone's materialistic to a degree. Everyone has, but when you go like in extremes, it's going to pose problems. And when you, like for instance, if you go in one extreme like materialism, you're kind of losing the global viewpoints. So the key is to try to put yourself in different avenues. You can do social media, it's fine. Like there's no judgment there. But it's good not to put too much intensity on one given thing, because ultimately, to me, that saps the energy reserves. To me, it doesn't give you the spark. It doesn't give you ignite the flame. It doesn't, give you the life, the force that allows, people to ascend. And consciousness essentially is it's a function of energy. And by ascending and becoming more aware, we can be less reactive. Essentially, that's what I'm getting at the point. We be less reactive to the situations that transpire in our life, and that's when you kind of separate. When you get to the point when you realize that simplicity, life is just you should be laugh at or enjoy the simple things in life, and just even if you just laugh at yourself, from time to time, and just never. It's something that, or not take life too seriously. Life is just, it's very, it's finite. We never know when the end is. You can't, you never know, but you should always try to live life and just try to live with optimism and, go with confidence and move forward. And ultimately, if you do get sucked down, it's just there's multiple ways to get out of it, just whether it's exercise, whether it's certain void in your life, because everyone experiences different voids, and the void could be like you you may be more apt to socialize more, you may need a relationship or so forth, and if you don't have that, it could be a void in your life, and that can kind of sap the energy. So ultimately, to strive towards things that you interest you, because that ultimately will give you the force, or allow your life to be at least meaningful and fulfilled. And yeah, that's all I have.